The year is 2030. You're the supreme commander of a hostile superpower. You have the ships. You have the soldiers. You have the political will. You've just given the order to invade the United States of America. And for the sake of this thought experiment, let's pretend the US military has magically vanished. Poof, gone. No aircraft carriers. No Reaper drones. No Marines. Just the land, the people, and the infrastructure. You think this is going to be easy? You think you'll plant your flag on the White House lawn within a month? My friend, you're about to walk into the greatest logistical meat grinder in human history. Before we explain why America is a geographically engineered fortress designed by nature to kill invaders, smash that subscribe button and join the Wealth Forum. We break down the economics, geography, and hard truths behind global power. Today we're revealing why the United States isn't just a country. It's an unconquerable kill zone. From the moment your boots touch the sand, if they even make it that far, you're fighting a battle against physics, economics, and a civilian population that makes the Viet Cong look like a homeowners association dispute. Let's get into it. Let's start with the most obvious problem, the one that kills your invasion before you finish your morning coffee, the moats. To the east, the Atlantic Ocean. To the west, the Pacific. These aren't just bodies of water, they're logistical death sentences. If you're invading from Europe, you have to cross roughly 3,000 to 4,000 miles of open ocean just to reach the East Coast. Coming from Asia, you're looking at nearly 6,000 to 7,000 miles to hit California. Let's put that in perspective. During World War II, for the Allies to invade Normandy across the English Channel, a gap roughly 20 to 100 miles wide, it took years of planning, millions of tons of supplies, and the total economic output of 3 superpowers. That was for a gap you could almost swim across. Now imagine doing that, but stretching the supply line to 6,000 miles. Military doctrine suggests you need force supremacy to hold territory. Let's be conservative. Say you want to land 500,000 troops. That's modest for occupying a nation of 330 million people spanning 3.8 million square miles. You don't just ship soldiers. You ship their food, ammo, medical supplies, and most importantly, fuel. A modern armored division consumes hundreds of thousands of gallons of fuel per day. To support an invasion across the Pacific, you'd need a bridge of ships so dense you could walk on it. And here's the dark comedy. The United States has no nearby staging grounds. In most invasions, you build up forces in neighboring countries. Germany used France to attack Britain. The US used Britain to hit Germany. Who are you using to hit the US? If you stage in Hawaii, you're still 2,500 miles from the mainland. That's like staging in London to invade Iraq. The sheer volume of shipping required would be visible from space. It would take months to assemble. There's no surprise attack. You aren't sneaking up on America. The moment you start loading ships, the US economy shifts into total war mode. By the time your first vessel reaches US waters, your soldiers have been at sea for weeks. They're seasick. Their muscles have atrophied. They're eating MREs, and what greets them? Not a welcome mat. The West Coast is largely rocky cliffs and treacherous, currents with very few deep water ports. San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Diego, that's about it. These are bottlenecks. If defenders scuttle cargo ships in the entrance to Long Beach or destroy the cranes, which they absolutely would, you're stuck offloading tanks onto beaches while taking fire. On the East Coast, the water is shallow, swamps are treacherous, and urbanization is so dense you're fighting in a concrete jungle the second you step off the boat. Otto von Bismarck once said, "God has special providence for fools, drunkards, and the United States of America." He was right. Geography is the first line of defense. And for the US, geography is a serial killer. Okay, so the oceans are impossible. You're smart. You're a tactical genius. You decide to land in Canada or Mexico and drive in. Congratulations, you just played yourself. Let's start north. You land in Canada. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. Millions of square miles of exposed rock, swamps, thousands of lakes, and dense freezing forests. One of the most inhospitable terrains on Earth for mechanized warfare. There are very few roads going north to south that can support heavy armor. The infrastructure isn't there because nobody lives there. It's too cold. The ground is too hard. If you land in Vancouver to come down the west coast, you're funneled into the Cascade Mountains, narrow choke points where a handful of defenders with explosives can bury your entire convoy under a landslide. If you land in the east, Halifax or Montreal, you march through the Appalachians and dense New England forests during winter. General Winter saved Russia from Napoleon and Hitler. North American winters are no joke. Your supply lines freeze, your tanks bog down in spring mud, and you're doing this while occupying Canada, which is just as culturally hostile to you as the US. All right, north is out. Let's go south. Land in Mexico and drive up. Welcome to the Sonoran and Chihuahuan deserts. This isn't just hot sand. This is terrain that kills people trying to walk across it with a backpack, let alone an army moving heavy equipment. But terrain isn't your biggest problem. It's the logistics of the border. The US-Mexico border is roughly 2,000 miles long. But where can you actually drive a tank across? Not many places. You have the Rio Grande acting as a natural moat for huge chunks, vast stretches of unpaved wilderness. And once you cross, you're in the American Southwest. Texas, Arizona, New Mexico. From a logistics standpoint, the distances are mind-boggling. Cross the border at El Paso and you're still 1,400 miles from Chicago, 1,700 miles from Washington, D.C. You have to drag supply lines across thousands of miles of open desert with very little infrastructure to scavenge. Furthermore, consider the fuel problem. The US is the world's largest oil producer. If they scorch the earth, blow the refineries in Texas, cap the wells in the Permian Basin, you're driving into a desert with no gas stations. Historically, invasions fail because of overextended supply lines. Napoleon in Russia, the Nazis in Russia. Invading the US through Mexico or Canada creates the longest, most vulnerable supply lines in warfare history. Now let's say you achieve the impossible. You cross the ocean. You bypassed Canada and Mexico. You established a beachhead on the coast. The hard part is over, right? Wrong. Now you deal with the shields. If you landed on the west coast, look east. See that massive wall of jagged rock stretching from Canada to New Mexico? That's the Rocky Mountains, 3,000 miles long, over 300 miles wide at points, peaks soaring over 14,000 feet. There are very few major passes. The ones that exist, like Interstate 70 through Colorado, are engineering marvels traversing steep canyons, tunnels, and bridges. In defensive war, resistance doesn't need to fight you in the open. They just blow the Eisenhower Tunnel, drop the bridges in Glenwood Canyon. Suddenly your multi-billion-dollar invasion force is stuck in a parking lot on I-70 surrounded by vertical cliffs. And who's up on those cliffs? Locals with hunting rifles that can take the head off a coin from 500 yards. You aren't fighting conventional war. You're fighting Afghanistan on steroids. If you invade the East Coast instead, capturing coastal cities, now you push inland to the heartland where the food and energy are. Welcome to the Appalachians. While not as tall as the Rockies, the Appalachians are a dense foliage-covered nightmare for armored vehicles. They run from Alabama to Maine. They create a natural barrier between coast and Midwest. During the 18th century, the British Empire couldn't effectively project power over these mountains. They got bogged down, ambushed by irregulars who knew every creek and ravine. The geography forces you onto predictable roads. Predictable roads mean IEDs. Every bridge is a choke point. Every tunnel a potential tomb. Let's stop talking about geography. Let's talk about the scariest variable, the people. There's a quote attributed to Japanese Admiral Yamamoto. You cannot invade the mainland United States. There would be a rifle behind every blade of grass. Whether he said it doesn't matter, the math makes it true. According to the Small Arms Survey, there are roughly 400 million civilian-owned firearms in the United States. That's more than one gun for every man, woman, child, and infant. About 40 to 50% of households own guns. And we're not talking just pistols, AR-15s, high-powered precision hunting rifles. Millions of rounds of ammunition. In Wisconsin alone, during deer hunting season, roughly 600,000 hunters head into the woods. If Wisconsin deer hunters were an army, they'd be the 8th largest standing army in the world. Bigger than France, bigger than Germany, bigger than Iran. And that's just one state. Those are just registered hunters. You might think, but those are civilians, not trained soldiers. My force has tanks. Sure, let's look at modern warfare. Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. How well did heavy armor fare against decentralized, motivated insurgency armed with small arms and homemade explosives? Not well. And those insurgents worked with rusty AK-47s and limited ammo. An American insurgency would be the most well-funded, well-equipped guerrilla force in human history. You're not just fighting rebels, you're fighting combat veterans. The US has been at war for most of the last 20 years. There are roughly 18 million veterans living in America. Many have combat experience. They know how to make IEDs. They know ambushes. They know logistics, communications, squad tactics. Imagine occupying a small town in Missouri. You have a checkpoint. You think you're safe. Suddenly, your supply truck hits a pressure plate. A drone bought off Amazon for $50. Rigged with a pipe bomb drops payload on your commander's Jeep. Snipers engage from 3 directions using thermal optics from sporting goods stores. You try to return fire, but they melt into suburbs, cornfields, woods. This isn't war where you take the capital and the country surrenders. The US is a federation of states. If you take Washington, D.C., Texas doesn't care. Texas laughs. Taking D.C. might make the rest fight harder. There's no head of the snake. Resistance would be hyperlocal. Every county, town, neighborhood becomes a fortress. You'd need roughly 20 soldiers for every 1,000 civilians to police a hostile population. For 330 million people, you'd need an occupation force of 6.6 million soldiers. The entire active duty Chinese military is about 2 million. The entire Russian military is around 1 million. You literally don't have enough humans to occupy the United States. And the infrastructure? The US is designed for commerce, not conquest. Driving New York to Los Angeles takes 41 hours non-stop. In a war zone, that could take months. The US relies on its interstate highway system, but it has a fatal flaw. Bridges. Over 600,000 bridges. If defenders execute scorched earth, they don't destroy every road. They just drop key bridges over the Mississippi, Missouri, Ohio rivers. The Mississippi splits the country in half. Below the bridges and east and west are severed. You're stuck on the bank, having to build pontoon bridges across a mile-wide river with strong currents while being shot at. Let's step away from the battlefield. Assume you're a wizard. You bypass the Navy, climbed the mountains, dodged the armed civilians, kept your tanks fueled. You're actually winning the ground. War. Congratulations. You just triggered the economic apocalypse. And the victim isn't just America, it's you. The United States isn't just a participant in the global economy. It is the operating system. The US dollar is the world's primary reserve currency. Roughly 60% of all foreign exchange reserves are in USD. Most global trade, oil, gold, commodities is priced in dollars. If you destabilize the US government to collapse, the dollar becomes worthless. Good, you say. Think again. If the dollar hits zero, trillions sitting in your country's banks vanish overnight. Your own currency, likely pegged to or backed by dollar assets, free falls. Global trade stops because nobody knows what anything is worth. You're not just invading a country, you're blowing up the bank where you keep your own savings. Second, tech and intellectual property. Where are your servers? Your cloud data? AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. The physical internet infrastructure is heavily concentrated in the US. Start bombing data centers in Virginia, where massive internet traffic flows and you don't just cut off Netflix for Americans. You crash your own banking software, your own military communications. You blind your own satellites and the brain drain. In an invasion, the US wouldn't leave tech for you to steal. They'd execute Operation Paperclip in reverse. The smartest engineers, nuclear scientists, AI researchers get on planes or submarines fleeing to allied nations. They take encryption keys, blueprints, source code with them. You conquer Silicon Valley and find empty buildings and bricked servers. The value isn't in land, it's in people and systems. And those systems have poison pills. By invading the US, you're shooting the pilot of the plane you're also a passenger on. The crash won't just kill Americans, it sends your nation back to the Stone Age. Finally, let's talk about the most boring yet effective defense. Federalism and bureaucracy. The United States is not a monolith. It's 50 separate countries in a trench coat. In centralized nations, capture the capital, kill the dictator, war is over. In the US, the president has surprisingly limited power over states. Governors hold keys to National Guard. County sheriffs hold keys to local enforcement. Over 3,000 counties. Each with its own sheriff, police force, local laws, stubborn pride. If you capture DC, the governor of Texas doesn't surrender. He probably declares himself president of the Republic of Texas and mobilizes Texas State Guard. California does the same. You don't defeat one government. You defeat 51 governments plus thousands of local jurisdictions. And the sheer stubbornness of American psyche, a culture founded on telling government to go to hell. Americans argue with their own government over parking tickets. How will they react to foreign occupiers? You'll face malicious compliance, sabotage, strikes, civil disobedience on unprecedented scale. The electrical grid mysteriously fails when you broadcast propaganda. Water supplies contaminated. Roads blocked by accidents. You spend more policing the population than you could ever extract in resources. It's a negative sum game. The longer you stay, the poorer you get. So let's recap your invasion plan. 1. The oceans. Cross thousands of miles of water vulnerable to attack just to reach the fight. 2. The neighbors. Drag supply lines through frozen Canadian hell or scorching Mexican deserts. 3. The geography. Push tanks through Rockies and Appalachians, natural kill zones. 4. The people. Occupy a nation where grandmothers own shotguns and combat. Veterans hide in every suburb. 5. The logistics. Maintain supply lines across a continent designed to break with bridges, destroyed before you see them. 6. The economy. If you win, you crash the global economy and destroy your own wealth. Invading the United States isn't a military operation. It's a suicide note. A logistical impossibility wrapped in geographical nightmare, deep fried in economic ruin. The United States doesn't need a massive standing army to remain uninvaded. The land itself does the heavy lifting. The Atlantic and Pacific are the walls. The Rockies and Appalachians are the towers. And the people, they're the garrison that never sleeps. So to any aspiring superpowers, don't do it. Not because you're nice, not because of international law, because you will lose. Badly. That's the reality of American geography. It's the ultimate cheat code in the game of civilization. If this breakdown of America's natural fortress opened your eyes, smash that like button and subscribe to The Wealth Forum. Turn on notifications, because we break down the geopolitics, economics, and brutal truths that shape our world. Here's my question for you. Which state would be the hardest to conquer? Florida with the gators and swamps? Alaska with the brutal cold? Or maybe New York with the attitude and density? Drop your answer in the comments below. I'll be reading the best ones. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and remember, geography isn't just maps, it's destiny. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.